Okay, we're live.
Okay, I'll take that as my cue. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us with another Open Runes talk. So for those who are new, our Open Runes is a series of online talks where we invite artists and writers or curators or just other people from the photography and the art world to come and talk to us from their living rooms, joining us in ours. And this evening we have Tobias Zielony, and Tobias has a project called Maskirovka, and that's in the exhibition that we're reopening the gallery with at the beginning of September. And that exhibition is called The Time We Call Our Own. And it's guest curated by Adam Murray, and we have the very generous support of SEVENSTORE, who are based in Liverpool. So the project was made between 2016 and 2017, and it focuses on like the techno underground culture and communities. And we'll be talking a little bit with Tobias, and he'll be showing us some videos and talking about the work. And we'll have some questions kind of going back and forth between us. But as always, if you have any questions, just put those into the chat and they will magically make their way to me. And after here, we'll be in our Discord chat as well, where you can speak with like everyone else, and Tobias will be there as well. And as with like the previous talks that we've been doing, we also have a playlist. And that's something that Tobias has put together, and we can listen to that while we're in the Discord. So Tobias, if you're ready, I'll start with the first question, which is just really simply, like, what does the word Maskirovka mean? So what does it mean literally in itself, but also what does it mean in terms of the project?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello to everybody. Yeah, the word Maskirovka, the way I understand it is, I understand it's Russian, and it means something literally like little masquerade or play with masks. But it is mostly used nowadays as a military term for kind of camouflage operations. Mostly, it's most often used to describe the Russian intervention in Ukraine after the Maidan Revolution. So the first part was the occupation of Crimea, of the Crimean Peninsula. And the second part was the support of volunteer rebels in Eastern Ukraine, and a kind of war that's still ongoing. And Russia is kind of secretly, openly supporting the rebels fighting against the Ukrainian government. So what happened in Crimea is that out of nowhere, soldiers arrived that were later called Little Green Men. And they were like special unit soldiers without any like name or flag or something. They just said, "We're here, we are fighters." And they had guns and so on, and they very quickly occupied Crimea, and they kind of created some kind of facts on the ground before anybody knew what was happening, before any kind of resistance was formed. And that kind of tactics, it's called Maskirovka.
Okay.
So,
and I know that you also have like a few videos that you could maybe share with us.
yeah.
So if you can line up the first one, and just to let people know as well, that this film doesn't have sound, so you're not like missing out on anything if you can't hear anything. That's the way it's supposed to be.
So do I have to share the screen, or is it my screen already?
Yeah, so if you share your screen.
Okay, wait.
I'm
on Vimeo. Bildschirm freigeben. Can you see my screen now?
Can you make it bigger?
Yeah, I can. I just... Is it?
Perfect. Okay. Yeah.
We're good. Oh my, it's a lot of things at the same time on my screen. Okay, so it's mostly the video now. Yeah, it's silent. And maybe a bit later we can talk about the way it's kind of produced. But first of all, I'd like to say that my idea after spending so much time in Ukraine was that the Russian interference wasn't supposed to occupy the whole of the country, but it was really to unstabilize and to compromise all aspects of life. That's my idea, in a way that asked so many people about to describe the situation to me, both at close to the conflict line in the east, but also in Kiev itself, and people really had a hard time saying this is happening. And I think that was one of the main intentions of Russia, actually, to confuse people about what is true and what is not true. And I kind of use that term Maskirovka as a kind of metaphor in both the video work that we are looking at now and the photographs. So you will see a lot of masks in in the video as well.
And what is this like layering or like the flickering of the two different perspectives of the cameras?
Yeah, so I used to do a lot of stop motion animations, which is basically I take a lot of pictures with my digital cameras. Like, I hope you can hear me, like click, 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 click. Like thousands basically. So I did a few videos like that. And then I would animate those videos, those images. But there was something interesting. When I was in Kiev, I went to the cinema archive and I started reading about Soviet filmmakers and their idea of montage, of creating like new meaning or new realities even by putting different parts of a film together, by almost like violently combining things. And what I did here is that I have kind of two streams of stop motion animations that are intertwined, I don't know, like in a zipper. So there's like one line of pictures and then there's a second line and they come like A, B, A, B, A, B. And my idea was a little bit that I confront different realities in the kind of most unedited way and create like new meaning every second in a sense, you know, and also lose a bit of control on my own material. So we did a lot of things really by accident. We overlayered different kind of like lines of images.
And can you tell us a little bit more about like the people who you're photographing or the people who you're working with, and also like where this is happening and when?
So I met Tasha, Ukrainian woman in Germany, and she invited me over. And it turned out she's kind of, now she moved away, unfortunately, from Kiev, but she was at the heart of the many scenes that are more or less one scene in Kiev. There she is actually with a flashlight. And it started out really as a project about like kind of underground parties and different kind of techno parties, but also the few nightclubs that later became really famous, like Closer in Kiev. But it was interesting to me that a lot of different scenes from fashion, graffiti, art, were kind of all meeting in the same places again and again and creating this kind of, let's say, little islands of solidarity and also being very open to different forms of art, for example. So here's an event. It was, I guess, it was a kind of graffiti tattoo fashion event at a canal, you know, and it's just people meeting there and spending hours and hours and drinking and making a campfire. But as you see, it's overlayered with pictures of the architecture in Kiev.
And so how do the people like pass that message along in terms of like knowing when and where to meet? And then how did you intercept those messages as well? Like how did you become part of that?
Yeah, here Tasha kind of took me around. This was like, I guess, a Facebook event or Instagram. I guess at the time, if I would have just gone there on my own, I wouldn't have been at a lot of places. But once you're kind of inside, it's very easy, you know, it's like, and you meet the same people again and again. It was really this feeling of, I don't know, maybe only a few hundred people, or maybe up to 1,000, but there were like, you know, like people that I really got to know very well that were organizing their own parties. And then at some point, I actually organized 2 parties myself. And also my apartment that I had rented became a bit of a meeting point for people that came there after the club, you know, to hang out and chill and yeah, and I don't know, have a tea or beer. And at some point I would also take pictures then in my apartment. It was also very cold. I was there in winter. You know, people knew it was a kind of nice space and with good heating. So yeah, it was this kind of process. Yeah.
So like over the course of the project, it went from you like having to be introduced to the people to then like becoming like a really integral part of this project and having people, so you're going from like being in their space to them being in your space, essentially.
In a sense, I mean, it was obvious that I wasn't there so super long, but it was even like sometimes people would say, where's Tobias? You know, like where's the photographer? If there was a party or something, you know. So, but for example, this party here, I organized and I asked people to bring their own masks. You know, and a lot of people turn up with self-made masks, or we made masks on the, you know, in my house. So I started. I had this. I started reading about this Maskirovka term even before I went to Ukraine, and so that kind of followed me, you know, and I kind of saw masks everywhere. Maybe one thing to say about masks is that the Maidan revolution, the major uprising in the winter of 2013 and 14, where a lot of the people I photographed were actually participating in one way or the other. The major turn of the protest was when the authorities outlawed face masks. You know, when they said it's forbidden to cover your face and hide your...
It's unpatriotic to cover your face.
In a sense, it was, I mean, we had these laws in the early 90s in Germany. I remember being a young activist that with a sudden it was forbidden to wear masks. You know, only the police, of course, still is wearing masks. You know? So now it's a different situation, of course, with the virus, with the pandemic. Yeah. We've gone through the whole video. Maybe I
know you have a presentation as well. We could switch to that and show the audience that as well. But just going back to the idea of what you're talking about in terms of like masks and also ideas around like hiding identity and protecting identity. But there's also like an element of performance in this as well. And I'm really curious to know like your thoughts on like activism and performance as well. And we can talk about like other types of activism later. But the mask is like doing two very different things at the same time.
Yeah, there is even, for the book, I made 4 interviews with 4 women, or we made interviews, Tasha and I. And there was a lot of discussion about the Maidan and how actually protest was acted out, was performed, you know? It was not only the violence or not only the let's say, the messages that were put on posters and so on. And I got really interested in that idea of performing political agency. But when you go on a more like intimate or private level, you could also think about parties or even different ideas of identities that, you know, that are performed in a sense. And also, yeah, and of course, masks are a weird thing because they kind of replace the face you have by a kind of mostly not moving new face, you know. So it's also this kind of game of, you know, of who you are to whom, maybe.
What do you think that does? Like the sense of having a face that is like featureless or expressionless, but also in a space that is really like filled with joy and celebration and things like that. Like how does that change the feeling in the space while that's happening, while people are wearing full face masks?
Actually, I have to say that it's not like at the parties that people have masks all the time, you know, it's just, it just happens.
Okay.
And also Tasha told me there's a long tradition of like pagan tradition of different kind of masks in Ukraine. For me as a photographer, it was really weird because I've done a lot of portraits in a sense in my life. And to photograph somebody where the face is kind of hidden was kind of really difficult exercise to me. I think it was easier for me when it was performed and with the moving images than in a still image like here with the aluminium foil mask. So I mean, something I haven't mentioned yet is that the Kiev queer LGBTQI community is very much part of that kind of underground scene, and then kind of the kind of safe places to meet are most often these parties or clubs. So while they might not be so much under threat from the authorities, it's still very dangerous to walk the street and appear to other people on the street to be openly queer or gay or lesbian and so on. So in a sense, I also had this idea of some things have to be hidden and some things have to be shown in certain times and places.
Well, that leads really nicely to a question from Liz. And she's saying, her question is around like the idea of people disguising themselves, particularly if they're parts of communities that are kind of under threat or under attack. And her question is around like, do you have like an ethical or practical approach to protecting people's identities? Like, is that something that you are thinking about while you were photographing, or is that something that comes afterwards? And then kind of more generally, like how do we take pictures of people who are protesting and use those images in a way that is kind of a force for strength, but also protecting people? Like what is the balance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't normally photograph people that are protesting. And I remember in Berlin, when there were a lot of protests from the refugee movement, the movement itself actually had set up some media groups where they worked together with photographers, also to make sure that, you know, the photography produced was actually supporting their cause and not kind of putting people at risk. Here in Kiev, I was from the beginning, I think it was clear what I was doing, and people were accepting that. And the process was also that quite often I would send pictures the next day to people, and they would already post them on Instagram or something. So I think it was a very transparent process, and I don't think I put people at risk with the project. And people were very, I would say, welcoming to the project itself. Yeah. But it's not, the pictures you see in the video from the kind of fights on the street, they were actually hooligans fighting. So, and you actually don't see their faces either, you know. So I wasn't there for the Maidan revolution when that question would have been very important, the same as it is now probably in Minsk in Belarus.
And then I know that we were talking before, like just before we went live, around the idea of how this project is now read very much as being very much like of the queer community for the queer community, and very much being read as like an LGBTQIA+ project. But you were mentioning that that's not necessarily how the project started.
It's not how it started, and also not how it, maybe also because the scene is so kind of, let's say, open in many ways. And also a lot of people don't want to be put into certain kind of boxes in Kiev. And I actually like that atmosphere. And I wasn't trying to put any kind of, how do you call it, like name on it or something. But the way it was, when I started showing it, especially in Berlin, the way it was perceived and read, kind of tended towards that. there's something else that I found interesting in Berlin. I mean, first of all, when in Kiev, when I got there, people were like so excited about Berlin, you know, and they all wanted to come to Berlin, and they had this kind of projection and desire about it. But when I first showed it in Berlin, it was the other way around. People in Berlin got really nostalgic and said it really looks like it looked here in the 1990s, you know, in Wolfgang Tillmann's pictures and so on. So there are these kind of two directions of projection, and maybe also the way images are read.
And so as the meaning of the project changed, like what is it that you think people were looking for or hoping for in that new reading of it? Like how did it end up being kind of skewed in that direction?
I mean, I wasn't like trying to fight that, because I think it's a big part of the project. I don't know. I guess I think the project, especially the video brings together both the kind of political frameworks, the kind of the violence that there is in the Ukraine, but also it shows some kind of ways of resist, at least in a kind of in a number of kind of let's say in a number of communities, or one community that is kind of creating its own kind of rhythm and social life. And I guess that's also very encouraging. So I don't know. Yeah, I cannot really tell. Yeah.
I guess maybe that's always what happens with a project. Like you come into it with one intention, and then you make the work, and then it's just read by whoever is looking at it, and it just transforms over the course of time anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think it's interesting to note that also Ukraine, I mean, there was even a kind of hype for people to go there to the parties, or then the other way around, that DJs were invited to play all over Europe, to play at Berghain and so on. So I guess at some point people will also look at my work and maybe other works that were produced at the time as kind of already kind of a time gone, you know. So it's only like 3 or 4 years, but things have like moved on so fast.
Do you think there's like a sense of nostalgia, like looking at these images?
I have it already. I noticed when I put together some tunes yesterday, and I mean, I know the images quite well, of course. I printed them, I've seen them in many exhibitions, but more the music that I hadn't listened to. And I try to find music from like that was played at the club, like the famous Club Closer, or, you know, around those days. And I really got nostalgic about it. You know, there's such a weird harshness and coldness in the music that we might listen to later, but also this kind of very strong sense of warmth, or of intimacy, you know, that people, and me too, experienced there.
Mm-hmm. And like, what was the role of music in those spaces? Like, was it like, what comes first for you in the project? Like, was it around the music, or was it around like the way that people are presenting, or like finding their communities, or does it all just come together to make the final project?
The music is not in the project. I mean, I tried a lot to put music to the silent video, but it didn't really work out. It ended up being a music video rather than that kind of almost violent, like, sequence of images. So I didn't use music a lot later, you know. So, but for the parties, of course, it was crucial, and a lot of local people became producers, became DJs. Oh yeah, the guy here on the left, Andre, he started his own nightclub 2 years ago, next to his fashion line and so on, you know. So there was this kind of, everybody tried to do something, and also there was no other way, you know, like people really didn't make, or probably don't make any money any other way, you know. live together in really small apartments or with their grandparents or something. You know, it was really this kind of self-made kind of underground culture at the time, and music was probably at the center of it.
So taking a bit of like a sideways leap, but moving on from like the idea of nostalgia to the idea of like these ideas or memories or thoughts that we are either trying to hold on to from the past or trying to let go of from the past. I know that you have some other work to show us, like another video piece to show us about zombies.
Yeah, I mean, that's very recent. Okay. I go out of this presentation.
Yeah, we can come back to this again if people.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine. It's there we go.
You maybe, I think before you press play, I think we might maybe need to like add in some context around this as well. And just maybe talk a little bit about the idea of like trying to get away from history or always being chased by history, but also like the group that inspired you to make the work as well.
Yeah, so this is really a recent work. I first showed it last Saturday.
Oh, it's super new. Okay.
Yeah, so we filmed it a month ago because we couldn't film before because of the pandemic. And yeah, so it's really fresh, and I'm still insecure about showing it. That's why I was a bit reluctant yesterday when we spoke. The background is that I was invited to an art festival in the city of Chemnitz in Saxony. The city used to be called Karl-Marx-Stadt, which means Karl Marx city. It's this kind of communist model city, at least it was, and at least in terms of architecture. And now, unfortunately, it's more famous for right-wing violence and right-wing parties being in the local parliament, open racism in the local university and in public space. It's really, I spend a lot of time there, and it's really, yeah, not a good place. I don't know. Each time I'm happy to leave. And 2 years ago, there were major riots. Maybe you've seen that on the news, even in the UK. There were like up to 2,000, 3,000, I think even more neo-Nazis, and also local people protesting against whatever they thought, like against refugees, against foreigners, and so on and so on. They were chasing people that, in their, from their perspective, looked different down the street. They attacked a Jewish restaurant, a Turkish restaurant, a leftist cultural club. So the city and the local museum asked some artists to produce work for this festival that opened last Saturday. And I'm one of them. And I looked into the history of the NSU right-wing terrorist group that you probably have heard of. There were 3 members mostly, and over a period of 13 years, they killed around 10 people. 9 of them, at least 10, that's what we know, maybe more. 9 of them were from different migrant communities in Germany. They also, exploded some nail bombs. They robbed banks to kind of survive living underground. They had a huge supporter network. And then in 2011, the 2 men killed themselves in a camper van and set it on fire. And the 3rd member, the woman, she's now in prison in Chemnitz. And the trio lived undercover in Chemnitz, I think, for 8 years. And the city is still somehow denying the whole story. So my idea is to make a zombie movie where I'm saying these people, even though the 2 they might be dead, there's a lot of rumors about their death, but they kind of come back to haunt us. But I also wanted to show some kind of possibility to fight back, in terms of some kind of empowerment to the 2 people, the main heroes that we're going to see in the blue suits, that live in this building that you see, and There's a lot of noise in the film, so I don't know how difficult it is to talk over it.
Yeah, I'm actually just gonna mute my microphone so we don't get lots of feedback, but we can play it like a little bit and then
yeah, I can play a little bit now.
Yeah, and then we can mute it and then like talk over a little bit if we need to.
If I mute it here, is it mute? Is it mute?
It is now, yeah.
I go a bit fast forward.
You can play the sound during this bit if you like. Okay. Do you want to maybe like walk us through?
I don't know if you can hear me actually.
Can you turn the sound up? I don't think people can hear the sound on it.
Ah, I don't know how to do that really. Maybe we quickly go through the film. So maybe you see me fast forwarding it. And now we come to the fighting scenes. But can you hear me talking? I stop the video now. Hello, Mariama?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know how much sense it makes to run through the video now. It seems a bit weird. I don't know if you can hear the sound and so on.
It was a little bit quiet. I think we could hear like a little bit, but you can
I
like
can
maybe
maybe run in the background, but
yeah, let's do that. If you can maybe like start it from the beginning or something.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have to say it was a very new experience for me to do a video like that in so many ways. I never directed a film. You know, we even had this kind of script. We had a big team for stunt people, and it was also a very collective project. So for performers, they totally developed the whole fighting action. Another artist, Israeli artist, she produced the masks and the artworks for the car, for the caravan, and so on. So there were like a lot of people involved, and I actually enjoyed that too. And now it's running in public space in Chemnitz, and I wonder what's going to happen there. I'm a bit afraid that people are going to destroy the space actually, because already one of the artworks from the festival has been destroyed, and yeah, so I'm a bit afraid that people just gonna tear down the projector or something. So
And is there like a policy? So in terms of like sharing your work in public spaces, and then if it is destroyed, like what is your response to that? Like, do you leave it or do you fix it or do you?
there is a local museum involved. Oh, that's not the right one. And I guess they would try and fix it. Can you see this picture?
Yeah.
So next to the projection, we have this wall with posters that we made that somehow relate to the history of the terrorist group, but also we kind of zombified some of the historical photos. And yeah, so yeah, I wonder what's going to happen if it's destroyed. I mean, we probably try to fix it as good as possible or until we run out of money. Let's see. We also don't know yet how much of a provocation the film is, you know, so I thought to make it really use this kind of genre of the horror film or the zombie film in a sense to make it approachable for people to relate to it in a sense of kind of popular culture. But I think the message is still pretty clear, you know, so, and the idea was basically to kick ass, you know, of these Nazi zombies in a very kind of sophisticated way. So, but we will see what's going to happen in Chemnitz. Yeah.
And in terms of the artwork itself, can you imagine like touring the artwork and like and what kind of response you'll get in different countries? I think like starting this work and showing it in Germany is a particular like decision. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's something very particular about showing this film about Nazism in Germany, first of all.
Especially in Chemnitz. Also, I guess that most people, I hope at least, recognize the iconography of the pictures on the wall and the camper van. So they kind of know what it's about. And obviously, if I would show that work abroad, most people wouldn't understand that necessarily. I just sent it to a friend in Brussels, and and she, yeah, she had she read it in a very different way. I wonder what it means. I guess if people have the background about what it is about, and if they understand that it's kind of a loop, like a nightmare that's repeating the way we present it, I guess it would work in different places, but I didn't think so much about it when I made it. So I guess a lot of work in public space that is made for a certain place ends up being actually for that place, or, you know, so yeah, even showing it in Berlin would have probably very different result and meaning, and, you know, and reading it as an artwork rather than, let's say, a part of protest or part, you know, of kind of a political action makes it's a big difference. Yeah.
And what do you think the relationship is now between art and activism? Like even just compared to when you were making the first project that we were talking about, like have you seen changes in the way that you approach projects, or the way that projects are read, or the way that people collaborate or contribute to projects?
I mean, I've been doing artwork for a long time now, so I think it's been the last 5 years really that I guess it was like that in the 60s and 70s and probably many times in between, but that activism and art became closer again. I think it's a more recent thing, and I actually more and more think it's important. I don't think it makes better art or something, or more politically correct art. It's more like that me, and I guess a lot of artists, feel that it's not just enough to make a nice piece of art, you know, that we really should try and use our voice, as weak as it might be, to take up a stand.
Having some kind of responsibility for the work that you're showing, or the way that you...
Yeah, I mean, also, I don't think it's changing so much, you know. I always wonder if it's better to go out on the street and in a big protest, or to produce an artwork that is seen by 100 or 2,000 people, you know. But in a sense, I still have the feeling we cannot just sit still or wait or something, you know, especially when you're invited to a place like Chemnitz. There was another collective who took their art, as they called Pen Collective, a German collective. They took their artist fee, or at least a huge part of it, of around, I think, 10,000 euro, and bought stuff from the local Antifa. So, and they exhibited in the museum. but of course it was basically a way of channeling all the money to the local Antifa, you know. So, I mean, this is going beyond producing an artwork. I mean, the whole process you could call art, but you could also just call activism, you know. So, yeah, I choose to produce this film. There was, you can tell, it's a lot of production and a lot of time and a lot of money put in. You know, it's going a different way.
But I think it's interesting what you're saying about the Pen Collective and that they used their fee. So they used the money that was given to them in like public funds, and it was put towards Antifa. And I think that's making it very, very clear like what the relationship can be between art and activism. But that's I feel like that has always been a part of art anyway. So when an artist is given a fee and they make a body of work that is provocative or political or has some kind of activist sentiment or theme to it, maybe it's less obvious to some people, but that same method or that same kind of transaction is still there. And I think there's something really interesting about making it very, very overt in the way that the collective did. And I think it's just like another way of making that relationship between art and activism, just reminding people that it's always been there, because maybe I think some people can tend to forget that it exists.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a good example really, because I just got back and I really thought there's also different intentions. I mean, I guess both the collective and us with the film project, we were also some kind of collective in the end, but we probably had very similar intentions of kind of doing something about the situation or helping the local people in Chemnitz that are trying to fight back. But we go different ways. And I don't know which one is better or something. In my idea really was that I make a film, or we make a film where you really want to identify with the two heroes. You know, where really you come out and you have this idea in mind that you can actually be, you know, like we could actually fight back, you know, and also this kind of, these people, these terrorists, they were murderers and killers and monsters, you know, but to put a picture on it might be also kind of rewriting history in a sense, but also it creates a picture that at least I cannot get out of my head anymore. You know, if I think about them, if I read about them, which I still do now, this kind of comes up, you know. So you could also argue that this has some kind of, I don't know, influence on how people look at the history and also the present day situation.
So I think maybe that brings us to the end of the talk. Okay. But just to remind everyone that we will be on Discord and we can like continue having like the chat conversation there. And also just to remind everyone that if you stay where you are, if you stay in Twitch, we'll relaunch and we'll start playing the playlist that Tobias has put together for you. So we can have like a little bit of music, a little bit of chat. But I think that kind of brings us to the end of things. So thank you again. Thank you for sharing the work with us. I didn't realize it was so new. So I feel like even more special and even more kind of blessed to have seen this. I think that's really kind of generous of you. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody. And please write any questions and I hope I can answer some of them. And see you in the different space. What's it called? Discord.
Discord. Okay, yes. Fine. So So if we leave temporarily and we come back, we'll have the playlist here and we'll have the Discord chat as well. Okay. So you can see everyone there.
Okay, fine.
All righty. Well, thank you, and we'll see you soon.